Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Minimalists podcast, where we discuss what it means to live a meaningful life with less. My name is Joshua Fields Milburn.
And I am Ryan Nicodemus, and together we are the Minimalists.
Welcome to episode 121. Today we're going to talk about emotions.
Oh
man, I've had an emotion-filled week the last week.
Oh yeah?
Yeah, it was a worry-filled week last week.
Josh, you literally have two emotions that you feel.
Well, the other one is unadulterated rage. But I keep that all bundled up really tight. It's locked in a jar deep down in my cold heart.
Why were you so emotional this week?
No,
I've never heard you ever say I've had an emotional week.
I don't think I said emotional. I think I said emotion filled.
Oh, okay. All right. But emotion filled is kind of emotional.
Well, that's what I wanted to talk to you about before we dive into the questions today. So we had two events this past week. Our friend Courtney Carver was in town. She had a book come out called Soulful Simplicity.
What a great event.
Yeah, we were able to give the intro at her event at our favorite bookstore in the country. It's called The Last Bookstore. It's downtown Los Angeles. So at that event, we gave the intro, but then the big thing this week was we had this filming. We've been planning for months and months and months for this event.
Dude, all the stress, all the anxiety. Now I see what you're saying.
Yeah, all the planning. Like we would meet.
The anticipation.
We were meeting daily to practice. And so over the last year, we've given this talk in about 50 different cities, the Less Is Now tour. And we're getting ready to finish that in Australia. But we wanted to take this talk, this 45, 50-minute talk, and we wanted the right aesthetics for it. We tried to film it a few times at different theaters, and it looks great when you're at a theater, but it doesn't look the same on film, right? It just looks like you're in a theater. So we found this beautiful abandoned warehouse space, but trying
to be honest with you, I don't think I ever look good on film. I just trust Matt's creative eye.
All right, well, take us out.
So when he says, dude, when he said, guys, the theaters aren't going to work, we have to do something different. I'm like, oh, okay. I just do what he tells me to do.
Well, it wasn't so much about us looking good or bad on film. I think we're going to look pretty much the same no matter what.
I think it just being not appropriate, but I can't think of another word besides appropriate.
I think appropriate's a good word. Appropriate for our message. Like, what is the aesthetic that correlates with our simple living message and what we're trying to talk about? And so we wanted to create our second documentary that really dives deep on our backstory and really build it around this talk that we've been giving, where we talk about intentional living. We talk about the downsides of consumerism and consumption in our own lives and everything we went through in the past. And then we talk about how do we move forward in a meaningful way? How do we contribute beyond ourselves? And we wanted a space that was right for that, but the most ideal space was an abandoned warehouse. And trying to have an event in an abandoned warehouse that isn't used as an actual warehouse, they're not stocking stuff in there. It's 4 blank walls, a ceiling, and a floor. And then we had to do everything. And so Podcast Sean and Matt, they put in a ton of prep work. We had a production crew, I think, of something like 20 or 24 people.
That was so weird, dude.
We've never had that many people.
And they're all there to help us create this amazing thing.
Right.
And it's so crazy, being on this side of it. It's every time I watch a TV show now or a movie or whatever it is, and I see the talent in the show, I don't think to myself, oh, who's that actor or who's that actress? I think man, who's the producer behind that? Who directed that? What's the production team? Because
who's the key grip?
Exactly. I have a completely different perspective on it, because if it wasn't for all that amazing team,
right,
it wouldn't be anything.
Yeah, the build out was amazing. I mean, we spent basically a day and a half. When I say we, I mean the team. We had this empty warehouse, and we had to build a stage. We had to put all the chairs in there. I spent 11 hours on lighting, and then, of course, 5 cameras and a director set up, and then you had to get craft services for everyone. And we don't just have endless money to throw at this thing. And so it's Sean's all right, how do we get some ushers in here for less money than what people usually charge? We use a service called Yonder, this is the first time we've ever done it, but I'm like, man, maybe we should do this at other live events. We don't usually have a very big problem, but when you're filming the thing, I don't want someone all of a sudden to just start talking on their phone or texting or even getting and taking a picture, usually that's fine to take a picture during a live event, but when we're filming this, but you certainly didn't want all of a sudden a phone ringing and then someone talking on it in the middle, you're giving your speech.
I didn't ask this, but before so Yonder, just for the people listening, it's a company. You go to an event, they check your cell phone, they put it in a bag. You get to keep your phone with you the whole time, but it's in a bag. You essentially can't use it. Do they make you put it on airplane mode before you put it in the bag?
I think so.
They must.
Yeah, Sean's giving me the nod. Yeah, so either airplane mode or silent mode.
Yeah. And you can totally use your phone. If you want to use your phone, there's just a designated area where like you go.
You have to leave
they unlock it and they're like, great, you can go over here and use your phone.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so just getting everything right, getting the sound right, and everything that is part of this event, everything had to go right. And there were a million things that could have gone wrong. And so, of course, I'm worrying about that. And it's making it hard to sleep the last couple days of right before the event. And I'm just trying to figure out, like, okay, do we have this planned for? Oh, what about this? I can't believe I didn't even think about that. And man, I can tell you, it all came together. And it couldn't... Nothing is ever going to be flawless, but it couldn't have been closer to flawless than it was.
Yeah. God, Matt got the footage he needed, and that's what I keep telling myself. But I feel like every event, there's like maybe 2 events I left, and I didn't feel wanting. Meaning, I didn't feel like, oh man, I should have said that differently, or man, Ryan, you sure did ramble on that one question. And
so wanting is an emotion. So we're talking about emotions here today. Wanting or desire or craving is another way to say it. That's like an intense wanting, right?
Yeah.
And I agree. It's like even when things go great, we want it to be better, and when things go bad, of course we want it to be better. It's sort of part of the human condition.
Yeah.
And part of that is probably good, right? Otherwise, we wouldn't reproduce. We wouldn't ever eat if we didn't ever feel the desire to eat, right? If we didn't feel hungry, then we'd just die. If we didn't feel the desire for sex, we wouldn't reproduce, and there'd be no people here anyway. And so it was a worry-filled week, but here's the thing, the relief, which is also an emotion that I felt afterward. I mean, Bex was like, you won't stop smiling like all day after.
When I called you Sunday morning, you've never answered the phone that cheery.
I hate talking on the phone.
You've never answered the phone that cheery. And I was like, wow, like Milburn's in a good mood.
Yeah. And I mean, I felt so like relieved and like this tension was just gone, because here's the thing, with our live events, we could totally screw something up and it's going to be okay, because we're not spending tens of thousands of dollars to film it, right?
Right.
If you mess up a line or I literally trip on stage and fall over, it's okay. Like, I'll get up and someone will laugh and it'll be fine. But on film, you want it to be right. It's never going to be perfect, but you really want to be able to put your best foot forward. And when we're doing it all ourselves, us and this team of people that we put together, anything can go wrong, and it's totally on us, and we have to take full ownership of that. And so after the worry, though, you realize, like, you didn't have anything to worry about at all anyway, because it all went fine. And that worry was at least mostly for naught. I think up to a certain point, the worry allowed us to plan appropriately, right? Yeah. But there was probably an unhealthy amount of stress or anxiety that I was feeling throughout the week that I didn't need to feel. It was the opposite of productive.
That's interesting, an unhealthy amount of stress, because I feel like I stressed out too, but I don't feel like it was an unhealthy amount. I feel like I needed that stress to help me keep a sense of urgency on like practicing leading up to the event, on making sure to be on time on places, and making sure that I was fulfilling my end of tasks that I needed to do to help with getting, which wasn't a lot, but the few things I had, it was important. So I do think that stress is a healthy thing up to a certain point. But yeah, so why are you saying it was unhealthy for you?
Well, I think for 2 reasons. One is there's a healthy amount of stress that's an indicator I should take some sort of action. But also, you and I are 2 different types of people. You thrive in more stressful situations. Back in the sales world, it'd be the last 5 days of the month and you're in 7th place, and all of a sudden you finish first out of all of the store managers. For me, I would start the month off and try to get the first 20 days. I have such a large lead that all of a sudden I can feel good about the last 10 days. And so I think we operate differently. I don't need that stress to make sure that I practice. I just need it on the calendar. I need the habit or the ritual.
Right.
For you, the habit and the ritual can be there, but it's far more compelling for you if you have a emotion tied to that ritual.
Yeah, I've got this anxiety, and the anxiety, to me, it indicates, like, leading up to the event, the anxiety indicated, Ryan, you've got to practice today. You've got to make sure that everything that you need to have scheduled is scheduled. The people that you need to be there, you have them showing up. You're double checking that they're going to be there. Like, that's what the stress does to me. It is because where I'm trying to go with this is that eliminating that stress, the thought of eliminating that stress, like, that is really motivating for me. So maybe that's why I operate so great off of stress, is because, like, the thought of when it's gone, like, that is what inspires me to push hard. Does that make sense?
Yeah, but it's ironic as hell.
I know, it's really weird.
It totally makes sense. I totally get it.
Yeah.
And I feel the same sort of motivation, but I will do things to get rid of the stress.
It's almost like I could just sit here and pinch myself.
Right.
I'd be like, man, it's going to feel so good when I'm done pinching myself.
Right. Why are you hitting yourself so it'll feel good when I stop?
It feels so good when I'm done. But you know what, though? That's how I look at, like, the when we go to Voda, the Russian bathhouse.
Yeah.
That's how I feel about the cold plunge, dude. Like, what keeps me in the cold plunge is the thought of getting out of the cold plunge.
But see, you and I are the exact opposite on this. I actually enjoy being in the cold plunge.
Oh, that's crazy.
Yeah, like, I can be in there for 5-6 minutes. People think I'm insane.
It's like the more miserable I am in the cold plunge, the better it's going to feel when I get out.
Yeah, it feels good to me to be in there.
That is so weird, man. Like, that is it literally, like, the exact opposite motivation.
Well, you've heard listeners of this podcast sometimes refer to us as the head and the heart, right? Like, I'm the head of the podcast, you're the heart of the podcast, and thus that's why you could say I'm the intellectual side and you're the emotional side. And it's not that you don't have intellect or reason or I don't have emotions. It's that those tend to be our default settings to a certain extent.
Josh, I want you to go buy theheadandtheheart.com.
That's a band.
Is it really?
Yeah.
Oh. I was going to say, we should rename this podcast Head and the Heart.
No, we shouldn't. When's the last time you cried?
My cousin's funeral last weekend.
Wow.
Yeah, he was 27 years old, man. Did I mention this on the last podcast?
No.
So, yeah, no, he was 27, passed away unexpectedly, and yeah, I had to go to a funeral last weekend. That's about all I'm going to say about it, because I really don't want to dive into it too much, just out of respect for my family and stuff.
Sure.
Yeah.
So I think I've cried twice that I can remember in my adult life. But it's weird because, and the reason I bring that up, once was when my mom died.
I know why you're bringing it up, Josh. It's because you're so manly.
No, it's
you want to show us and our audience how manly you are.
No, well, here, this will remove that right away. I don't think I've even told Bex this. So I think the last time I cried specifically, it was a few years ago. And I was out of fear. I had met Bex and I hadn't planned on being in a relationship. I didn't want to be in a relationship. Like, I had gotten out of one, and like that, I'm like, okay, I need some time outside of relationships for a long time, maybe forever. and then I found, like, this most ideal relationship when I wasn't looking for it. And I was falling in love really quickly, and that terrified me. I was scared to death because I didn't want to experience the come down again that I had with the previous relationship, which I wrote about in Everything That Remains, that relationship with Colleen. And man, like, I didn't want to go through that again. And I remember just laying there and realizing, like, oh, this is the real deal. In fact, this is better than any real deal I've ever experienced. And it wasn't just the infatuation of the moment. It wasn't the honeymoon stage of a relationship. it was something different. It wasn't that chemistry is good. Our chemistry is great, but that wasn't it. It was something different. I remember just laying there and just like literally one tear came out of each eye. And I'm like, I remember feeling this sense of overwhelm, and it was fear, but it was also like, of course I want this, and that's why I was afraid, because I did want it. But here's the thing: that's what when we talk about like, oh, Ryan is the emotional half. Well, why? Because you show more emotions than me, and when you talk about, we all have emotions. So when we talk about someone who has emotions, it conjures up all kinds of images in my brain. Like if you say they're a really emotional person, if I were to say that about someone, I described them. I said, yeah, he's really emotional. What kind of images would that conjure up for you?
That person's really dramatic.
Okay. Yeah, and they might show their sadness.
That
or
person
anger.
loves themselves some drama.
The drama, yeah. Rage, anger, craziness. You and I have both had the privilege of dating crazy people.
Yeah, that's true.
Bex
I've been
and
a little crazy myself sometimes. I'm not going to put it all on the girls.
No, and
Not all on my partners.
That's why I said people, right?
I mean, I'll put the majority of it on them, but it's not all of them.
Well, and that's why I said people, because Bex and I were actually talking about this weekend. Because I was talking about the crazy person I was dating right after my marriage, the one who threw scissors at me, and Bex was like, you are like really like filling in the narrative for like the crazy ex-girlfriend thing. I'm like, well, that's my only crazy ex-girlfriend. It just happens to be that I'm a heterosexual male, and so I date women. I'm sure if I dated men, I would have dated a crazy man along the way. In fact, I think there's pretty good data to show there are far more crazy men out there than there are crazy women.
I don't know, Josh. Can we just agree that we're all equally nuts?
No.
That's ridiculous.
No. The data does not support that.
So this is where the head and heart comes in. I will say we're all equally nuts, and Josh will agree that yes, we are all equally nuts.
No, but here's the weird thing. When you say, or when I say, or someone says he's a really emotional person or she's really emotional, what we often mean is that sadness, that anger, that rage, the craziness. But how come we don't ever like mention the other emotions? Happiness is an emotion, right?
Sure.
Contentment is an emotion. Hope is an emotion. You don't describe a hopeful person as emotional, although if they're really, really hopeful, then they're really emotional.
Yeah, but all those emotions you just brought up are like, they're pretty ambivalent. So the problem is that, and when I say ambivalent...
I don't think so. What about joy? Joy is
so
an
when
emotion.
I say ambivalent, what I mean is that I could be in a room happy and content, and you could possibly not know it.
But if you were joyous, I'm more likely to know it.
Oh, sure. If I'm like jumping up, leaping with joy, yeah, absolutely.
Right. But you generally wouldn't say that's an emotional person unless they were like overly joyous, like manic or something. Then that's an emotional person. But how about a person who's just really kind? Kindness is an emotion, and you can only see that they're kind if it's outward. But if a person's just kind, we don't say, "Oh, he's a really emotional person." Or
no, you'll say that person's see. That's just it. So if someone's really kind, you'll say that person's a really kind person.
Right.
Man, that person's really loving. Man, that person is really, and you'll actually name the emotion. When you say someone is an emotional person, that's where it's a pejorative. In my brain, and like that's the connotation I have.
I agree, and I think what we need to do is maybe reclaim that, because emotions aren't inherently good or bad. They're both good and bad, right? And here's the last one for you. The one that I was thinking about just now is you do see this outwardly because it's a lack of display, but calmness. Calm is an emotion. It's the opposite of anxiety, right? If someone's really calm, you will see that they're really calm, but we don't say that person's a really emotional person, even though they are. And so I think maybe instead of us using the term emotional pejoratively, and believe me, I am predisposed to use that term pejoratively because can
we see how many times we can say the word pejorative on this this podcast?
I think that was twice.
No, I started it.
Okay, I'm
projecting. Sorry.
So I think that the calm person is equally emotional to the angry person. It's just a different emotion. And so maybe we can reclaim that so that we aren't using that word to... We're not using that word to discourage people from embracing what those emotions are. We just don't want people to get stuck in those negative emotions. I think we have to feel the negative emotions. And the key then is to embrace the valleys for what they are, but get out of them as quickly as possible so we can enjoy the mountaintop, the calmness or the happiness or the contentment or the hope or the kindness that we experience once we've reached higher ground. We've got some questions here today. Also, when Courtney was in town last week, we dragged her into the studio and had her answer a question or two with us as well. And so hopefully we'll be able to incorporate that into our questions this week. Caitlin in St. Cloud has a question for us.
Being a college student, I found that I have anxiety when it comes to the hard standards that I hold for myself. Not saying that it's a bad thing, but I often feel that I'm letting myself down if I don't reach to my full potential when it comes to performance in the classroom and out of class work. By holding these ideas, I often fall into overthinking and stress myself out way more than I should. I am unsure how I should go about investigating these kinds of thoughts and emotions. Do you have any insights or advice for how I can treat myself better in terms of performance and confidence of my abilities?
Ryan, she's talking about investing in these thoughts and emotions.
Investing in stressed out thoughts and emotions. I would never invest in those.
So let's imagine you and I, we both invest in the stock market, the S&P 500. It's the most boring thing in the world.
Yes, if you look at it like index funds,
you don't want stress, and you don't want to invest in the index fund with the stress and the anxiety. What we were just talking about, the person who's considered to be a traditionally emotional person, you don't want the emotional person index, right?
That's a great way of looking at it.
You want the broader emotional spectrum. You want to invest in the emotions that matter. Now, here's the thing. We were just talking about this, Ryan. You were even saying that some of these things help you out. They help you perform better. The stress, the worry, and especially if you are in college and there are certain standards there, and in fact she's experiencing anxiety from those standards, that's because she wants to meet those standards. And so there's a certain level of stress that is going to be useful.
Definitely. No, I think, it's funny, I was with Jessica yesterday, Jessica Williams, dropping her off at the airport. And I said something about how we always talk about raising your standards, lowering your expectations.
Right.
And she's like, Ryan, I got to be honest with you. I don't understand what that means. So I had to explain to her what we mean by that.
How'd you explain it to her?
If she doesn't understand what it means, it makes me think that maybe some of our audience doesn't understand what it means. So the way I explained it to her was, I used our documentary as an example where we put our absolute best foot forward.
Right.
We had this level of standard that we were not willing to forsake.
We want this to be outstanding, at least for us, even if we can't, because I can't predict whether or not 50 million people
or one
other person I can predict one, and that person's me.
Besides us, right.
And here's the thing. If it's outstanding for me, it's my gamble that maybe there are enough people with similar interests and tastes and people who appreciate the same aesthetics or narrative. Maybe there are enough people like me. And I don't mean 6'2" goofy looking white guys, but people with similar standards to me who will find value in this.
Absolutely.
But if I try to go out there and say, well, I really want this to appeal to Canadians over the age of 44, and it's like, well, I'm not a Canadian. I'm not over 44. Like, how am I? Well, it's possible, but it seems a lot less likely. It's trying to meet someone else's standards, right? And so having your own standards was really important when we were putting together the film.
Yeah, and I think that is, one of the expectations of the many that we could have had with that film. Who's going to watch this? The other thing is how much money are we going to make on this? We did not have any. We had no dollar figure in mind. It was you, me, and Matt who got together. It was a $0 budget. and it was something that we were really passionate about. And we said, great, let's create something really awesome and let's see what happens. And to your point, we gambled that, yes, as long as we had high standards, other people will find value in this. And could you imagine, dude, like if we had this idea of
expectation.
Yeah, this idea of how much money we wanted to make from it. Let's just start with that. Like that is what a recipe for a letdown, right?
Right.
Unless it was like, we're going to make $10 off of this, right? I mean,
well, even then though, because at first, like we had lost money, even with the theatrical release.
Oh yeah.
It was because here's the thing: we had zero budget
we broke even on theatrical, maybe.
No, we didn't. We were still slightly behind.
Oh.
But the good news is that we made up for it on the back end, right? And the reason we were slightly behind is because we didn't spend any money on producing this film because Matt, basically went around the country with us, and we were already going around the country, so it wasn't any additional dollars. But then everything on post production, the color grading, the music, the distribution through theater, I mean, all of this stuff, it all added up really quickly.
Yeah, I don't want to get too far away from what I'm trying to do with the raising standards and lowering expectations. What I'm really trying to say is, like, with that documentary, because we had zero expectations, when we did get an offer for theatrical release, when Netflix did decide that they want to put it on their platform, when people did go out of their way to support us,
share it,
and share it or purchase it on Vimeo, that was all gravy. Like, that was all icing on the cake. It was like icing and sprinkles on the cake.
Yeah.
Because we were not beholden to any expectation.
Yeah.
It did not matter. So applying that to Caitlin's question here, Caitlin, she should have high standards. There's no doubt about it. The expectations I would encourage her to lower. And what I mean by that is that Caitlin can study for a test as much as she possibly can, and that's all she can do. If she's going to worry about the expectation, the result, and have an expectation of a really high grade, that is going to add, in my opinion, it's going to add needless stress. It's the same thing with the event. With the special that we just filmed, my standard was really, really high. And I knew that if I had high standards and did as much as I could leading up to that event, it was going to be the absolute best event that I could possibly do. And I feel like it was.
Yeah.
Like I said earlier, I felt a little wanting. Like I just a couple little things I wish I would have done a little bit better, but that's okay. It absolutely was. It beat my expectations.
Yeah.
It absolutely beat my expectations.
Well, that's because you had very low expectations, and going into it, you had high standards. And so if I were to sum that up, or maybe just rephrase a little bit different, maybe the standards are the work, and the expectations are the goal, the end result. And don't worry as much about the goal or the end result. Worry about the direction or the work that you're putting in that's going to get you wherever you end up at the end of the day. If you put your best foot forward, you put in your best work, then you're going to exceed whatever expectation that you could have had before. But then those expectations aren't there. Because here's the weird thing. Let's say all of a sudden, Caitlin, your goal next year was to make $1 million. You're going to make $1 million next year, but then you only make $750,000. Did you fail? Yeah, of course you failed. You didn't hit your goal. You didn't hit your expectation.
75%.
But
that's a C.
Yeah, that's not very good, right? But hell, $750,000 is very good,
exactly.
Though. And so quite often, it's not just we have high expectations, we have the wrong expectations. We have unnecessary expectations, and we put them on ourselves. We also have other people who put expectations on us. And then here's the third thing. It's sort of an amalgamation of both. We think other people have expectations of us when they don't really. The pressure that we feel isn't from other people. The pressure that we often feel, 98% of it, is internal. The pressure that we go around stewing with is all self-created. And because we turn that burner on and it's stewing, we can also turn that burner off.
Yeah, I think the other thing I want to tell Caitlin too is, Caitlin, I've got good and bad news. You're never going to reach your full potential. I'm never going to reach my full potential. I really had to get comfortable with this, man. Like, again, going back to the special we just filmed, it's like the 2 or 3 things that I have in my head that I'm like, man, I really wish I would have done that differently. if I would have done those 2 or 3 things, there probably would be another 2 or 3 things that would replace those 2 or 3 things.
Absolutely, man. Because we can nitpick ourselves to death.
Yeah. And I think that's actually a good thing. I say it's good news because I imagine if I ever reached this full self-actualization.
Right.
Perfection, dude. Like this, when I think of what a perfect Ryan Nicodemus looks like, that it sounds boring to me. Yeah. And it's not boring in the sense of, there's no mischief I can get into, or there's nothing else I can learn, although that is kind of boring if there's nothing else to learn.
Sure.
But as humans, like we got to grow, man. We have to grow. We have to feel like we are becoming something more than our present self.
Yeah.
And that's a good thing, Caitlin, that you haven't got to that perfect self. So I guess what I'm trying to say is realize that you'll never be perfect, and that's okay. And all you can do is get as close as possible and pray that you never reach perfection. Because when you do, life's probably going to get really, really boring.
And I think that discontent that Caitlin is feeling in the moment, I think that can also be useful up to a certain extent, at least, because discontent is a commentary on the present moment. And it's saying something going on right now isn't right. Now, what that is, I'm not sure. Maybe it
could be her expectations.
It could be, absolutely, or it could also be her actions. And she used this word overthinking, and it stresses her out. Well, let me just tell you this, because here's my biggest problem, Caitlin, is I often try to think my way out of problems. You just can't do it.
I would say that's about half the work.
Yeah,
getting the right mindset and the right perspective.
Right.
It's half of the work.
But the problem with me and with a lot of people is it ends there. I think I'm going to ruminate my way out of this issue, right?
I'm going to use the law of attraction to make this happen. I have had this conversation with people where like they're just super firm believers in the law of attraction. And I too, I believe in it, but it's not the end all be all, meaning that the main problem I have with folks who rely solely on the law of attraction is that they're missing the action piece of it.
Yeah, which is the most important part, because You're right. We do have to have the right mindset. We do have to use reason and intellect and mingle that with emotion. And really what the law of attraction is focus, right? There's an old apothegm, wherever focus goes, energy flows. And all that really means is whatever we focus on, that's the direction in which we're going. But of course, if you turn your car east, but don't start driving east, you're not going to get to wherever you're going in the east, right?
Yeah.
And so, Caitlin, you can't think your way out of a problem. And so that means sometimes when we want to change the way we're feeling, change our emotions, we have to change our physical state, our physicality. And so the other thing that I often think about is motion moves emotions. The other day, I was feeling really stressed out right before our LA event and that taping, and so I'm just like, oh man, like I've got this headache, and I'm trying to deal with this, and I've got all these things to do. I need to go take 2 hours and really create some physical activity for myself. So our studio here is about 10 minutes away from Runyon Canyon. I just took that 10-minute walk to the trailhead and just busted my butt all the way up to the ridgeline, and I mean, it's gorgeous, but so I'm breathing hard, I'm feeling better, and all of a sudden it's like this stress is leaving my body because I can't focus on it anymore. I can only focus on what my body is doing right there. When we push ourselves, it's a different kind of focus, and it changes our focus from these negative emotions that are keeping us down, that we're overthinking, and all of a sudden we can come back to the problem with a renewed mindset, a fresh pair of eyes, and maybe approach it a little bit differently without the stress, or at least with less stress than what we had before. And also, she said that she's meditating right now. Here's the thing. Meditation does help. The problem I used to get caught up with is when I started meditating, I'm like, well, man, I did this 2 days. I did it over a whole weekend, 20 minutes yesterday and 20 minutes today.
You're so good at meditating.
I should have it figured out by now, but I all my problems aren't solved. This obviously isn't working. Well, it's the same thing as with going to the gym. Our friend Dan Harris says that meditation is like going to the gym for your brain. And I feel that way. Like, you can't just go to the gym Saturday and Sunday and bust your butt really hard, actually for 20 minutes each time, be like, I'm fit now. You don't get fit over the weekend, right?
Right.
You in your brain doesn't retrain itself over a weekend or a week or a month or even a year. It takes a long time for you to get physically fit. It takes you a long time to get mentally fit, to improve, to see these incremental changes. And so I think, Caitlin, meditation will certainly help you out if you do more of it. And also, what are the meditative things that you do? It could be going out for a walk. It could be doing yoga. It's not exactly meditation, but there are meditative tasks. For me, it's walking just from here to wherever. I like to have a destination in mind, even if it's just walking to the post office to mail a letter. I will walk 3 miles to the post office and back because I have a destination right there.
Yeah. My favorite is like walking to the office because it's about a 4-mile walk, and it's about hour and 20 minutes, hour and 15 minutes. I am forced to like not think about anything because like my whole point is like, gotta get to the office, gonna record a podcast. Like the point is the walking. And it forces me basically to I don't think about anything else. Like, I put my AirPods in and get going and have an amazing, relaxing walk.
Yeah. And it doesn't have to be relaxing. If you want to do something to really push yourself, you can do that. Being in the sauna is a way for me to push myself, and that is meditative for me. In fact, it's a meditative experience, but I also meditate in the sauna. It's the place that I prefer to meditate because it's harder. You really have to focus, and it's like it's training your mind on a different level. It's like you can do yoga or you can do hot yoga. You can do meditation or you can do hot meditation, and it does force you to focus a little bit more. Last thing that I'm thinking about here is this word flappability. Our friend Colin Wright has this essay that he just put out. We'll put a link to it in the show notes, but I wanted to read about it because he talks about, I think when I think of our friend Colin, he was just on our podcast recently. He's pretty stoical in his approach to most things, right? It's not that he lacks emotion, but he's able to employ emotion appropriately when the situation calls for emotion. He wrote this essay about it. It's called Flappability. There's something to be said for a stoic response to difficult or uncomfortable situations. To be more specific, it's nice to be able to step back and assess things from a mental distance, to recognize and acknowledge what's happening, but to address it from a place of calm rather than a state of emotional fragility. To recognize that you can't control what's happening to you, but you can control how you respond to it. So what we're talking about here is, most of the time, it's good to be able to step back. When we feel this crazy emotional response, we should be able to step back.
Dude, this is so important for Caitlin because she is so worried about the result. She is so worried about the result that she cannot control. Like the all the studying she puts into it, she's worried that she's not going to get the right result. But to your point, the only thing she can control is how she reacts to the result.
Yeah. And so maybe the best way to regain control is to give up some of that need for control.
Yeah. Going back to the lowering of the expectations, because I think expectations is a form of us trying to have control. We expect something, it happens, we feel good about ourselves because that means we're in control.
Right. And so I'm going to skip ahead in his essay quite a bit. It's a long essay. I encourage everyone to read it. It's one of my favorites from him that he's written recently. He goes on to say, that said, there is a potential downside to this approach to dealing with the often unpleasant variables with which we come into contact throughout the day. It's possible to rationally assess a situation only to realize afterward that perhaps emotional immersion would have been the better approach in that particular circumstance. You can look at a beautiful sunset and recognize that it's beautiful, that the colors are amazing, that the weather is perfect, and that you care deeply about the person standing next to you as you both look out together at this wonder of nature. That's a very valid and valuable flavor of enjoyment. But because of that mental air gap between you and the moment, it's not exactly the same thing as plunging headfirst into an emotional response to what's happening. You can enjoy a sunset stoically, but it may be more prudent in terms of full exposure to everything that's available to you in the moment to dive deep as you dare into what you're feeling rather than calmly and safely floating along the surface. And so I think what Colin is saying here, Ryan, is, yeah, we should often have a rational approach to much of life. And that gives us the ability, when we need to, have our emotions there to jump all the way in. You don't want to just go to a sunset and say, that looks like cotton candy in the cloud. I mean, you can say that, and there's an intellectual sort of side of it as well. No matter what, you're always going to have a mixture of both, unless you're a robot. But the truth is, there are moments where you could just want to be in awe of the moment. And I felt that the day after we finished the taping in Los Angeles, and we filmed 2 different events that day. Well, 2.5 really, because we had to redo the intro because we had a mic problem. That was great. So we had to go out and go give the whole intro once again. And at first I thought that was totally going to ruin the moment, right?
Yeah,
but
me
people
too.
seem to enjoy it more. Like, man, you did better on the second intro. It's like, you knew what we were going to say.
Yeah, that was good though, man.
Yeah, I thought it went really well. But here's the thing. Afterward, Ryan, I plunged headfirst into the emotions that I felt. The relief was... I was a totally emotional person, but the emotion that I felt most was relief and contentment. And those were the emotions that I let myself experience, instead of saying, I feel like I have accomplished this task. No, it was like, I feel so relieved, and I do feel accomplished, but in a way that is that has lent itself to this contentment, because I'm happy with the standards that we put forth, and that we were willing to put in all of that work, and then the payoff that came after that from putting in all the work. There wouldn't have been the payoff without that work, right?
Absolutely.
It didn't come from the expectations we had, though. It came from the standards that we had and the work we were willing to put in.
Yeah, man, we didn't just sit around and think about how great the event's going to go. Like, we put so much prep work into it, man.
Yeah,
it really paid off.
We didn't think our way into a great event. For Caitlin, there's a mindfulness chapter in our book, Essential. It's an essay collection, 150 different essays about intentional living. There's 12 different chapters on 12 different topics. One of those topics is mindfulness. Sean, if you could reach out to Caitlin and get her the audiobook version of that. If you like this podcast, you'll like the audiobook version of Essential, or if she'd prefer the physical book or the ebook, we're happy to give her one of those as well. And before we move on to our next question, we dragged Courtney Carver into our studio when she was in town last week to answer this question for Caitlin as well.
Here's the thing with Caitlin's, wondering how to invest in these emotions. You're going to feel what you're going to feel, but I think the problem comes in when we start judging ourselves for how we feel.
Okay.
So we feel anxious about feeling anxious.
Yes.
And that's a whole nother layer of not really treating ourselves well. So she also said, how can I treat myself better? I believe in that question. And so when she's feeling that anxiety, instead of judging for being anxious, turn to self-care. What can you do that might make you feel good? Like you taking a walk. For me, often it's writing down whatever I'm feeling, because sometimes if I can get the emotion out of my head and onto paper, I can see it for what it really is. And sometimes it's just completely useless, but I can't understand that unless I see the words on paper.
Our next question is from Ryan in Kansas City.
My father committed suicide in 2015 in direct response to the federal government seizing his belongings. And because of that, that's kind of what threw me into this minimalist lifestyle, and has kind of given me this anger towards maximalists or towards people who exhibit materialistic behavior. And I was just kind of wondering, how do I let go of that? Like, how do I not get angry at people that don't want to get rid of all of their things? And I realize that it's not for everybody, but I find myself getting almost resentful towards people that, in my opinion, value their stuff too much, which I know, isn't okay. So I guess I wanted to know what you guys do to both avoid getting angry at those people and also to, in the most caring and loving way possible, help guide them towards a minimalist lifestyle.
First off, Ryan, I'm really sorry to hear about your loss. I've been obviously through the death of a parent twice. Both of my parents have passed away. My father when I was real young, I was 9 when he passed away. I didn't know him very well. He left us my mom left him when we were, I was like 3 or 4 at the time. I was almost 4. And I saw him one other time, 7 years old, around Christmas, and he died when I was 9. And I mean, I talked to him on the phone occasionally, and so we didn't have a really close relationship. But as a kid, you look for a father figure. And I was lucky enough to actually get an adopted brother when I was right around that age. And he was and physically he was a year older than me, but he was almost like a father figure for me, but at least in terms of physicality, he was a really tough guy. And so I remember just growing up with him, having a brother who was also a father figure in my life. And then and I think that helped me out a lot. But then when my mother passed, I was 28 years old, and we didn't have the best relationship until I was in my 20s. She was an alcoholic, and it made growing up really difficult. But we repaired all of that throughout our 20s, and when I was 28, she passed, and it was definitely a different circumstance from what you're going through. But let me just say this: he likely committed suicide not because of the government seizure. Government seizures don't make people commit suicide, because government seizures happen every day. What happens when people harm themselves or kill themselves is they feel despair. Despair is a commentary about the future. It means I don't think things are going to get better. And here's the thing. We all feel despair. Many of us get trapped in despair. We feel a particular kind of pain, and that's because our basic needs are met. We have a roof over our head. We have food, we have clothes on our back, but our psychological needs are not being met. And when our psychological needs aren't being met, quite often we turn to things that harm us, whether it's the ultimate harm, which is killing ourselves, or I'm from Dayton, Ohio. It's the overdose capital of the United States. It's a great city. I love that city, but there's a lot of problems going on there in Montgomery County right now. And it's because a lot of people feel despair. And why do we feel despair? Well, we've lost this sense of purpose or meaning or joy or contentment, and we feel like there's no hope for the future. And what is the antidote? Well, I think it's restoring meaning in some way. We don't have a suicide crisis as much as we have a crisis of meaning in our lives. And I think we can change that by trying to find ways, not through the same repetitive means of yesteryear. Because here's the thing, if your dad would have gotten his stuff back, would he feel all of a sudden that his life was fixed and there was hope on the horizon? No, probably not. He would have felt comfortable enough to continue on a life that was still peppered with despair. And so I think what we need to do is we need to find a way to inject meaning, and that meaning is never through our things. The things have only the meaning we give to them. They can help us be comfortable, for sure. I'm not against consumption. We all need some stuff. You'll never hear Ryan and I say, get rid of all of your things and follow us. That was someone else. But what we will say is you're welcome to have stuff, but the more meaning you give to it, the less joy you'll get out of the less creativity you'll get out of life, the less you'll be able to do, because you'll be so tethered to the things that aren't bringing the real purpose, joy, and meaning. And so I think the anger that Ryan is feeling here, not the Ryan across from me, but the Ryan on the phone.
I'm so angry.
Ryan's angry because I just keep talking.
I know. Let me talk, dude.
I think the anger that Ryan is feeling is an anger toward consumerism. You said you're angry toward maximalists, or you're angry towards materialists. And I don't think you're angry at those people. You're angry at the behavior. And what I've realized, you can love those people even if you dislike their behavior. You don't have to be angry about it, though. You can dislike the behavior, because judgment is but a mirror that reflects the insecurities of the person who's doing the judging. So all you're really saying when you see the behavior of someone else, you're saying, I don't like that behavior because it's not an appropriate behavior for me. And in our documentary, Juliet Shore, she mentioned that the problem with our society isn't materialism. The problem is that we aren't materialist enough, right? We don't care enough about the things we bring into our life, but that everything becomes disposable. And then of course we care too much about clinging to the things that aren't adding any value. And we're not willing to let go because we don't see that someone else might be able to get value from that. And so here's what I'll say for Ryan is some of the emotions that you're experiencing are useful, right? I think that the useful emotions help you grow, but they become useless when you hold on to them too tightly. So if you're feeling angry toward anyone who owns stuff, then it is just a sign that, yeah, you need to be willing to let go of that emotions, not so that you can forgive them or whatever, but just so you yourself can move on. You have to let go so that you can move on.
Absolutely. Ryan, I think you need to continue to talk about this anger you're feeling. I'm happy to talk about it with you. I'm sure you have friends and family that are happy to talk about it with you as well. I would encourage you, if you haven't already, to get a hold of a professional, and don't be ashamed in that. When I was in the corporate world, I used to go see a therapist once a week, man. Tony Soprano totally inspired me.
Oh, for a second I thought you were going to say Tony Soprano was your therapist.
No, that'd be great though if he was.
You just walk in, James Gandolfini's in that chair.
No, man, like watching The Sopranos and seeing him go to a therapist every week to just vent out all of his crazy stuff. Now, he's a little bit different because he had like illegal stuff he had to talk about. Yeah. And maybe it was a little...
So did you.
Yeah, that's true. But it, you know what it really comes down to is that I think a lot of people feel embarrassed to go talk to professionals. They feel like somehow they've lost at life because they don't know how to deal with their problems, or they feel like it's embarrassing to like ask someone for help, right?
Yeah.
So again, Ryan, I'm sure you've already done this. But I know there's someone listening to this who has that stigma. There is no reason to not talk to someone who has experience in talking people through these emotions. The other thing I'll say too, man, is I'm not going to waste my life being mad at other people's actions.
Unless it harms you directly.
Well, yeah, then I'll, yes.
If Sean were to reach over right now and hit you in the head with a microphone,
I'd hit him back in the head with a microphone.
Stop breaking our microphones, guys. What's going on with you?
Tit for tat. No, but you know what I'm saying, man. Like when I see someone who's a maximalist, or I see someone who is a racist, or I see someone who, whatever, insert, someone that I would never associate with in my life there. Yeah. Like getting mad at them is not going to help them. It's not going to help me. It's not going to help anyone around me. Like,
and even so, if you find a person who's racist and they're harming someone else, even getting mad at them is probably not going to solve the problem as much as other things will solve the problem.
Right.
Calling the police on them, stopping them from doing something that harms someone else is better than just lashing out in anger, right?
Sure.
I think there's that John Mayer line. This is the John Mayer line segment of the podcast, where we inject the wisdom of John C. Mayer into the podcast. Now he talks about it was on the Continuum album when he said, has a sign ever changed anyone's mind? And I think about that quite often with bumper stickers or protest signs or whatever. I've never had my mind changed out of someone else's anger, right? Yeah. Now, can a pithy saying or something maybe influence me in a way, make me think about something that I didn't think about before? Yeah. Or maybe there's a funny sign that makes me laugh or something. That's fine. But really, with these emotions that we're experiencing, most of the time, man, it's just not useful. And man, we have such a hard time letting them go, though. And I think that's what her ultimate question is: how do I let go of that anger, Ryan?
Yeah, I totally agree. If I had the magic bullet answer on how to let go of anger, I would certainly give that to her right now.
I've got one for her. Yeah. So I've got a really, really short essay from Seth Godin. So Ryan and I, we often talk about ignoring the sunk cost. Like you've bought some widget that used to be worth $500, but now it's worth $50, and you're like, well, I can't let go of that $500 item. It's not a $500 item; it's a $50 item. Sell it while you can still get $50 for it, right?
Yeah.
Well, Seth Godin has this short essay called Ignore Sunk Clowns. Yes, there was supposed to be a clown at your birthday party. No, he didn't show up. That's a bummer. But your friends are all here, and the sun is shining, and you've got cake and a game of pin the tail on the donkey ready to go. The question is, how long should you mourn the loss of the clown? How much of your party are you ready to sacrifice? The same question confronts the pro golfer who 3-putted on the 3rd hole, or the accountant who forgot an obvious deduction, one that can't be recovered, or the salesperson who missed a key meeting, or the speaker who got let down because the tech crew screwed up her first 3 slides. If it doesn't help, why bathe in it? When we can see these glitches as clowns, as temporary glitches that are unrelated to the cosmic harmony of the universe or even the next thing that's going to happen to us, they're easier to compartmentalize. That happened. Okay, now what? So maybe your anger is just a sunk clown. It's just a clown. That happened. You're angry about it. Now what? And I think, Ryan, if you ask yourself that, it's going to help you deal with the anger. It's going to help you let go. Now what? Do I want to continue to carry this with me? Are you going to fill up your backpack full of anger, or are you going to choose to fill it with the emotions that are maybe a bit more helpful? In that essay, he said, the question is, how long should you mourn the loss of the clown? How much more of your party are you ready to sacrifice? So here's the answer for Ryan in Kansas City. The party here, in this metaphor, is the rest of your life. How much more of your life are you willing to sacrifice to anger and despair and regret? And when you ask it that way, you're like, I don't want to waste any of my life to anger. And we think about it a little bit more rationally, we can realize, I can let that go. I can feel it, but I don't have to wallow in it. I can walk through the valley. I don't have to live there. I'd love to send Ryan in Kansas City a copy of our book, Everything That Remains. In that book, I talk about dealing with my mom's death and sort of the process of going through all of that. It's there in the 3rd chapter, and having to walk away, not just from her, but her stuff. And Ryan, we got this question on Twitter this week. This guy said that his mother his father had stage 4 cancer, and he's trying to deal with his death the best way he can. He asked for some advice, and my advice for him was help him let go. Help your father let go, because in helping him let go, you yourself are going to be able to let go.
Yeah, absolutely. Hey, man, I think Courtney had something to say about this too.
I don't even know if it's really anger. I know when I find myself being mad or judgmental or feeling a certain way about what other people are doing, it's almost because I don't want to address what I am feeling. So I'm wondering if that anger isn't a bit of a distraction from being sad. And I know it's been a couple of years, but this is just something you don't get over immediately. And so to be able to divert her attention to trying to fix other people or wondering how to do that, she doesn't have to face what she's really feeling, which could be deep sadness. So
Sure.
I don't know, because I don't really know the situation, but that's sort of what I'm thinking.
All right, we'd love to hear what you have to say. So if you have a comment or tip about emotions, including advice for any of our callers today, leave us a voicemail, 406-219-7839. You can also email a voice memo right from your phone to podcast@theminimalists.com. We'll air our favorite comments and tips on a future episode. Ryan, what time is it?
It's time for our lightning round, where we answer questions from social media.
We are on Twitter and Facebook and Instagram @The Minimalists. During the lightning round, this is where Ryan and I both do our best to answer each question with just a short, shareable, less than 140 character response. We also put the text to these minimal maxims in the show notes so you can copy and share our pithy answers on social media if you'd like. And you can now find all of our quotes, all of these pithy answers that we give, some of which are helpful, over at minimalmaxims.com.
All right. Our first question is from Deborah. How important is it to take emotion out of big life decisions? Or should you let them guide your process?
Well, I have two little pithy answers here for you. The first one was almost a joke at first, but I think it's also true when you talk about taking all emotion out of important life decisions. So here's my first pithy answer. Emotions are like assholes. Everybody needs them. I mean, you think about, there's the whole opinions are like assholes. Everybody has whatever. Yeah. But but I think it's true of emotions. Like, we actually need emotions, and I think they're an important part of the decision making process, right? And so I think this is my second pithy answer. Let reason guide you, but let emotions inform your decision. So let the reason in your life, the intellect, the pros and cons list, let it guide you, but you also have to take into account emotions, because you can say, here's my pro and con list, here are the 17 reasons that I should move to Saskatoon, but if you get to Saskatoon and you're like, man, this doesn't feel right to me, you don't feel the right emotions about the place, your pro and con list doesn't matter, because Saskatoon is a great city. We've been there. But if it doesn't feel right to you, it just doesn't feel right to you. In fact, there are a lot of places we've been on tour where I'm like, I really like this city, but it wouldn't feel right for me to live here, right? And so you have to keep those emotions in mind when you're making a decision. Just don't let them guide your every decision. I think that's when you get into trouble. You sort of turn into that balloon who is, if you blow up a balloon, just let it go. I do this to Ella sometimes. She sort of chases around. It goes everywhere, right? That's how emotions guide us, right?
Yeah, definitely.
The intellect is the string on the balloon.
Well, it's funny because I think that as the heart of it, it could go both ways. The string could also be the emotion, because sometimes intellect, it is taking out the emotion. This is why people refer to us as the head and the heart,
right? Because
let me give you an example. Let's say you were a really an ex-hardcore alcoholic.
Yeah.
And if I drank alcohol in front of you, it made you feel like you wanted to have another drink. And it wasn't offensive, but it's just it's not great when you're around someone drinking, especially if I'm sitting there getting drunk, right? So what I would intellectually, I can look at it and say, it doesn't matter what Josh thinks. It doesn't matter, what's going on. I can get drunk if I want to. Like, it's not that big of a deal. Emotionally, I look at it and think, man, you know what? Josh really needs some support right now. And I'm going to put that intellect aside, and I'm going to put that emotion first.
Yeah, it sounds to me like you're approaching this very intellectually right now.
Yeah,
and I think what you're going through is
I guess what I'm trying to say is that the intellect in a situation like that, in my opinion, it's the wrong thing to let guide you.
No, I think you were letting, in that particular scenario, you were actually letting the intellect guide you, because the first thing is, I don't care how he feels. Mm-hmm. I feel how I feel. But then your intellect jumped in and you were like, well, no, I think this is the right thing for him, because it could, trigger him to going back to drinking. You were actually taking a very intellectual approach. But that said, I do agree with you that sometimes there are some decisions where emotion is going to rule the day, and I think that's okay too.
Yeah, I think when I read this question, the first thing I thought was, don't ever make any major life decision under distress. So, that is an old apothegm that I'm sure most people have heard. It's a saying for a reason.
Right.
So to answer her question head on, don't make any decisions when you are any major life decisions if you're under a lot of emotional distress. The pithy answer I've written down here is, it doesn't matter what you let guide you as long as your actions align with your values and beliefs. Man, how many times do we talk about values and beliefs, Josh?
Yeah, I think that's the key here, right? Like, that emotions and intellect are going to be involved in these decisions. Mm-hmm. Is the direction you're going in align with the person who you want to be?
Yeah, and honestly, man, like, the values and beliefs for me, it helps me to use the emotions or or the intellect.
Yeah, then they become different. It's sort of the flappability thing we were talking about with Colin Wright earlier. It allows you to use both when they are effective.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, for sure.
Absolutely. All right. Our next question is from the Motivated Stoic. Why is being emotional stigmatized while so many of us desire to feel good?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the thing we were talking about at the top of the show, right? The reason that emotional is stigmatized, and I'll give you a pithy answer here in a second, but the reason that it's stigmatized is because we think of an emotional person as a person who's out of control with negative emotions. Mm-hmm. And that's why they are stigmatized. But my pithy answer is some stigmas are useful. Other stigmas are a byproduct of fear. So choose your stigmas wisely. And so let's think about some useful stigmas here, right? I think debt is bad. I have stigmatized debt. Mm-hmm. I think racism is bad, and thus I have stigmatized racism. There are other stigmas that, or other emotions that are not useful, right? So jealousy. I will stigmatize jealousy as well, because I don't think there's ever, for me, in my own life, there's never a time that being jealous of someone else is useful, because that means I'm living up to someone else's standards, not my own, right? I'm letting someone else's standards or expectations or preferences dictate my life. And so I've stigmatized jealousy. It's choose your stigmas wisely.
Yeah. Yeah, man, I had a different tweetable answer down here. I'm not going to read it now. It just made me think the pithy answer I had pop in my head now is the only stigmas that matter are our own. And ultimately, if we let other people's judgments control the way we feel, especially when it comes to emotions, like if we can't be ourselves, then that's going to make for a miserable life. I think the one thing too is emotions are like, think about someone who's depressed, think about someone who's angry. He's asking about guys specifically, right? Or he's asking about people in general.
Just people in general.
Yeah, but regardless, if you think about those types of emotions, like those are the people that we don't want to be around. Like, I don't want to be around someone who's always angry. I don't want to be around someone who's always depressed. Certainly I want to support people in my life who may be experiencing things like that and help them.
Yeah, you want to help them get out of the negative emotions, though.
Yeah.
And here's the thing, you're not judging them for experiencing those negative emotions. When your cousin died and you were feeling sadness, I just reached out to you and said, hey, if there's anything I can do, let me know. I want to help you through that. Right. I don't want to say, hey, man, why are you feeling so sad today? Mm-hmm. That's silly, right? But I also want to recognize that being in that valley for too long is a dangerous place to be in. Yeah. And I'll help you get out of it if you need that help.
Yeah. No, I think ultimately emotions are stigmatized because of people's insecurities, man. Like they're like anyone who's like, I can't believe that guy's crying, or I can't believe that guy is showing, any type of emotion. Like that's usually that's an indicator of what that of that person's insecurities, right?
Yeah, they're wearing their insecurities well.
Right.
All right, y'all. Well, added value. Let's talk about some added value, Ryan. This is the portion of the show where we each talk about something that has added value to our lives recently. I've got two things. One is we've developed a new friend in town here. I've had a lot of health issues, of course, the last 3 years. But when we moved out here, I had 2 months right after our Nashville event, I got sick and I needed to get an IV.
Can I say that I didn't even know before you that if you were sick, you could pay a doctor to inject you with a bunch of vitamins, and it's basically it's like emergency or airborne, but times 100.
It's directly into your it goes right into your bloodstream,
right,
as opposed to having to process it via the liver and your stomach and who knows what's going to make it actually into your bloodstream then into your body without just getting relieved into the toilet, right? I mean, so a lot of you're buying some of those vitamin C packets or whatever from the store, a lot of that just ends up in the toilet, right?
Yeah, because your body just when you ingest it, it takes what it needs and gets rid of the rest.
Right, and sometimes some people's bodies don't do as good of a job taking what it needs. Right, and so a lot of it just doesn't go into the body at all. But if you're able to, so I've had a few IVs here recently. There's this place in Hollywood called Metro MD. It's just metro-md.com. A guy, Dr. Ryan Green, who is he's brilliant. He went to his residency was at the Mayo Clinic, and he's from Chicago, moved out here, and wanted to really focus on the wellness side of things and preventative, because he realized that and this is the reason you didn't realize, like, I can just go to a doctor and get an IV to really help me replenish and get well sooner, right? It's because most of our medical system doesn't focus on the preventive side of things. It focuses on once you already. If you tossed a grenade into a Honda Accord and then you take it to a mechanic, the mechanic is like, and you're like, hey, can you put this back together? That's what our medical system does, because we are putting grenades into our bodies, basically, at least the equivalent, over many years, many decades, and then by age 60, all of a sudden, it's like, here's your exploded Honda Accord. Whereas he wanted to, so Dr. Ryan Green over at Metro MD, he really wanted to help people beforehand. I think we're seeing more and more of this now. People, doctors, and this industry starting to change, focusing on wellness, focusing on preventing disease, and then also optimal health. And so you and I both went and got IVs a few days right before even though we were perfectly healthy, we went and got IVs a few days before our event. So, okay, we make sure we don't get sick over these next few days.
Make sure our immune systems are operating at as full capacity as possible.
Exactly. And wanted to feel good about it. You also got a blood test there, and
yeah, well, because my cousin passed away so suddenly, and it was like, oh wow, like I'm 36 years old, and if he would have got a blood test, might have saved his life.
Yeah, absolutely. And so when you think, I heard Tim Ferriss say something about if you get your oil changed more frequently than you get your blood checked, then you're doing something wrong. Yeah. And here's the truth: we're all doing something wrong then, because most of us don't get tested that frequently, but we probably should, right? And so I tend to get a blood test once a year, at least I have the last few years now, and just to see where are your hormones, what are your indicators, do you have anything that's out of whack? And because if you check it, that allows you to realize, like, okay, here are the things I need to adjust. Maybe I need to adjust this in my lifestyle. Maybe I need to take some sort of supplementation. When my gut was really messed up, I didn't know why, but when I did the test a few years ago, it's like, oh, you have C. diff, and that kills 14,000 people a year in the United States. I should probably fix that. But if I wouldn't have known that, I wouldn't have known how to fix it. But once you realize you have that, then you can figure out how to fix it. It doesn't mean it's easy to fix it. I got my blood tested last year, and for heavy metals. It's a totally separate test from what you got, but I got tested for heavy metals, and it was like, oh yeah, you have really high levels of mercury and arsenic, and lead is not crazy high, but it was high enough. Strontium was really high. And so it was like, okay, now you know this is high. You can do something about it. Here's a protocol. And again, not easy, but it's better than being in the dark. And then 10 years from now, all of a sudden, I'm on death's door because I've completely ignored all the issues and the signs that have been going on. And so I encourage people to, obviously, if you're in the LA area, I think Dr. Ryan Green is a great place to go. He's a great guy. He came to our event this past weekend.
Yeah, I was just gonna say.
And he was in he walked into the back where our green rooms and stuff were, and our booking agent that was there, Andrew Russell, and I'm like, hey doc, and he's like, who is that guy? I'm like, oh, he's just our doctor. He's like, you mean he's like a doctor on TV? I'm like, I don't think he's on TV, but he's definitely like, he's just an all around great guy. He knows a lot about health, and he's, man, I'm really grateful. Like, when you find the right people and you bring them into your life, I think it helps improve your life. We hear that old platitude of you are the 5 people you surround yourself with. It's also true with the 150 people you surround yourself with, and I'm grateful that someone like Dr. Ryan Green is in our circle. So,
well, yeah, it's funny, like, because I think about when I chose my chiropractor, I got this from, you'll remember his name. Tim Ferriss interviews him a lot. Kind of like an older, I think he's Russian, trained like all the Olympic athletes.
Yeah,
you know
Pavlov, Tatsulin.
That's him. he talked about how important it is to have a chiropractor, and how he's like, if you have a chiropractor that cannot deadlift as much as you, that's not the right chiropractor for you.
Interesting.
And it's funny because like I just so happened, like, my chiropractor that I had in Missoula.
Yeah.
And actually my chiropractor now could absolutely deadlift as much as me. But I think about that with a physician too. Like, it's funny when I go to a physician and like the physician looks unhealthy.
Right.
And they're telling me how to be healthy. Now I understand that there's a difference between giving advice and taking advice. In fact, I know very well about that. But what's awesome about Ryan Green is like, because he is so healthy,
right?
It's like his advice. I'm like, I want to be just as healthy as him,
right? And part of it is he has great genes, but here's the cool thing: you do too, and I don't. But you
whatever.
You can go down that path, and you can get similar results, right? You may not get the same results as actually his name's Pavel Tatsulin, and you may not get the same exact results, but you're going to get similar results, and you're going to get better results than. I agree with you, man. You don't want to. Our friend Carl, our mentor, both of our mentors, we used to work with him in the corporate world. He would always say, don't ask a guy who makes $20,000 a year how to make $100,000 a year.
Right.
And I think the same thing is true when it comes to your doctor. I used to go to a doctor back in Ohio who was unhealthy as hell. And I'm like, well, wait a minute. I'm thinking about now in retrospect, like, why did I trust him? Just because he was nice and friendly? Mm-hmm. But no, he prescribed a bunch of nonsense to me quite often. And I wish I would have found someone like Dr. Ryan Green over at Metro MD sooner, or wherever city you're in. Yeah, just go get your blood tested, see what's going on with your own life. If you get your car checked up occasionally, or maybe when you're getting your oil change, you just realize I should probably also get my body checked up at the same time if you're going to get your car checked up. Ryan, is there anything that's adding value to your life recently?
Yeah, man. How did you like that recreational coffee?
It was really good. So the brand is actually called Recreational Coffee, right?
Yeah.
I made Bex a cup a couple days ago in the morning. She goes, "Oh my God, this coffee's so good. Where'd you get it from?" She's like checking out the bag and stuff. And they're in Long Beach. Is that right?
They're in Long Beach. Yeah, I was up there doing Global Entry. Mariah and I had like these Global Entry interviews.
Yeah.
And just on a whim, I was like, man, I really want a cup of coffee after the interview, and just stopped in, got a Yirgacheffe pour over, of course.
Yeah. V60 or Toledo?
I don't even know, dude. I think it was V60. And then like as soon as I like took a sip, I was like, oh my God, I have to buy these beans.
Yeah. Thanks for giving me the bag, good. Man. I appreciate it.
Yeah, no worries, dude. But I'm recommending it because they sell their beans online. So I think the last I know I had a coffee recommendation on one of the podcasts recently. It might have been the last one. So that was with Blue Bottle Colombian. This one is recreational. It's an Ethiopian Yirgacheffe. That is specifically like the best roast that they have going.
Sean,
right
if you
now.
can find a link to that, we'll throw it in the show notes along with everything else we're talking about today. I'm gonna cheat and add one extra bonus added value. I just found it this morning, Ryan, and it's a really good new artist. She's 15 years old, which is unbelievable how talented she is. Her name is Billie Eilish, and so she has this album out that just came out toward the end of last year. It's called Don't Smile at Me. It's the way I can describe it is, the artist Lorde, mm-hmm. right? So, and Billie Eilish is from Los Angeles. Lorde is from New Zealand, I believe. So Lorde, if Lorde you mixed her somehow with Lisa Hannigan. Do you remember Lisa Hannigan? She was Damien Rice's sort of side singer. I mean, she was always with Damien Rice back in the day. So talented. All right, well, it's time for Right Here, Right Now, where we talk about what's going on in the lives of the minimalists. So we got some stuff going on. We're headed to Australia. We're headed to Perth and Adelaide and Brisbane and Sydney and Melbourne and Auckland. Most of those are sold out or really close to selling out. Actually, let me take that back. Melbourne is sold out. We added a second date for that. Perth, Adelaide, Brisbane, and Sydney are all really close to selling out. And then we have a event in Auckland as well. So if you can make it out, that's March. Come on out, see us, theminimalists.com/tour for all the dates, theaters, tickets, all that fun stuff. We've got a video version of this podcast coming soon. So if you want to subscribe to that, head on over to youtube.com/theminimalists. We'll do a regular video version of this, we'll also do some other video creations, whether that's video essays or little snippets from the podcast, more condensed or attenuated creations, videos just for you over there on YouTube. Also, if you want the show notes to this podcast and every episode that we put out, we can send them right to your email. Just head on over to theminimalists.com, enter your email address there at the top. We'll send you the show notes whenever a new episode comes out. Also, any essays that we write, that will show up right there in your inbox. And of course, we'll never send you spam or junk, and we'll never give your email address to anyone else, because only awful people do that. Oh, and if you want to support this podcast, you can do so. There are a few ways you can do it. Head on over to theminimalists.com, click donate at the top. You can support us one time on PayPal or Venmo, or if you want to become a regular supporter of the podcast, you can click on Patreon over there. You can become a Patreon supporter. Those are the folks that will help us build this beautiful new studio that we are in right now. And every week on Patreon, we publish a postscript episode. And what that is we answer additional questions from our audience just for our Patreon supporters. Now, I know what you're thinking. Man, I don't want to log on to the internet and listen to a podcast on the internet. That's stupid.
Do you log on to the internet?
Yeah.
What, are you still using AOL?
Yeah, the dial-up.
Josh, I have some exciting news for you.
Go ahead.
Have you ever heard of Zoom Town?
It's 768K? No way.
All right, so people don't have to log onto the internet to listen to our podcast.
You don't have to get on your computer or on some website or whatever podcast app you're listening to this podcast on right now. We do a separate podcast every week called the Minimalists Private Podcast, and it is just for our Patreon supporters. And so right after this comes out, usually the day after, we do a postscript episode where we answer questions. We're able to let our hair down a little bit more because there's only a few thousand people over there who are our Patreon supporters. Also on Patreon this month, we have released our Philadelphia events, Tampa events, and Detroit event. We had a guest at our Detroit event. That was Colin Wright. And so you can check that out. It shows up also in the Minimalist Private Podcast feed. So that all shows up right there. If you're listening to this on Overcast or Apple Podcasts or Feedly or whatever you're listening to, it's right there on your phone. It shows up. All you need is our private link. We've got some other live events coming soon just for our Patreon supporters. You also get first access to any tickets to any new live events that we announce in the future. If you're a Patreon supporter, you get the best tickets in the house before anyone else has access in the general public. And also, last thing that's coming on Patreon pretty soon is a studio tour of this new studio space. Once we get we're waiting on lighting to be installed and some new furniture to show up here. We're using a little temporary table and some temporary chairs right now. But you'll get to see that really soon. We're going to do a video studio tour on Patreon. Also, we do live streams every month where we answer your questions. It's called Ask the Minimalists Anything, and that is exclusively for our Patreon supporters. Head on over to theminimalists.com, click donate at the top if you're interested in that. I want to thank Courtney Carver for being a part of this episode this week. Check out her new book, Soulful Simplicity. We'll put a link to that in the show notes. Ryan, you got anything else for us?
Heck yeah, I do, man. Look at all these voicemail comments and tips from our listeners.
Bring it.
Hi, this is Tracy from Madison, Wisconsin. I am calling in response to the podcast about social media. It's wonderful, and there's so many things in there that I have struggled with and thought about, and I wanted to share that over the last maybe 6 weeks to 2 months, my relationship with social media has drastically changed because my intention with it has really changed. Mainly, I'm a kidney donor, and I started really speaking up about it and trying to educate people and becoming a resource for people who are curious about it, because there's so few out there, because this happens, but almost nobody talks about it. And it's been so rewarding in that every week a new person or even more than one person will contact me about donation. And it is the most rewarding way I have used social media. I also talk about finances, which was actually spurred from the budget podcast by the Minimalists. And I have gone like hell-bent on paying off debt, not using credit cards, and I now have this ripple effect in my social network of other people that are doing the same thing. So it feels good to be intentionally spreading the good and sharing the things most people don't talk about and seeing really positive results and even richer and more positive connections coming back from that.
Hi, my name is Tex, and I'm from Seattle. One thing I haven't heard mentioned on the show yet is minimalist eating. This is where you eat as few yet healthy ingredients as possible. I do this for breakfast, lunch, and snacks. A handful of nuts, 2 hard-boiled eggs, a glass of milk, a cheese stick, an apple, or a protein bar are all good examples. Not only is this healthy, but saves me loads of time throughout my day. In the evening, I do spend time on a quality meal and enjoy bad food. I mean, let's be realistic here, but the point is spending effort on simplifying your food gives you more time for your day and quality nutrition.
Hi, this is Anson Fellerup calling from Salt Lake City, Utah. I'm responding to your episode about decoration. I'm a designer and frequently help clients navigate through the process of creating an intentional home. And in this process, I avoid trends at all costs. If we really look at what trendy design is, we see that it's designed to encourage consumerism. Companies are motivated to make products that will eventually go out of style. So I direct clients to architectural and design history to inform the style of the home. Quality is just as important in function as it is in design.
All right, y'all, that's it for this episode. If you have a question for the Minimalists, give us a call, 406-219-7839. You can also email a voice memo to podcast@theminimalists.com. And if you leave here with just one message, we hope it's this: love people and use things, because the opposite never works. Thanks for listening, y'all.
We'll see you next time.